On the grand opening of my first cafe, my parents threw a lavish party, but not for me. They were celebrating my brother's new sports car. My name is Celeste Morgan, and at 29 years old, I had finally built something of my own, a cafe, crafted from years of sleepless nights, double shifts, and every penny I had saved. This day was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life, the day I proved to the world and to myself that I was worth something. My parents, Marianne and Ronald Morgan, had promised to be there. My mother had even sent a message just a week ago saying, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." My father, never a man of many words, had simply said, "We'll see." But as the ceremony began, they were nowhere to be found. No call, no message. At first, I told myself they were just late, that any second now, they'd rush through the door, slightly out of breath, with sheepish smiles on their faces. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. A photo. There, filling my screen, was my younger brother Jordan, standing next to a brand new fire-red sports car, a champagne flute raised high in one hand. Around him, my parents, along with a crowd of friends, grinned and clapped, confetti raining down. The caption read, "Congratulations, Jordan. Your family is always here to celebrate your success." I stared at the picture, my stomach twisting into knots so tight I could barely breathe. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't gotten stuck in traffic. They had chosen not to come. Not only that, but they had spent today throwing a party for Jordan, because he bought a car. I felt my hands tremble as I gripped my phone. How many times had I put them first? How many times had I sacrificed so they wouldn't struggle? I remembered every moment I had been placed second. When I was 22, I got an offer from a prestigious design firm. Instead of taking the job, I stayed behind to work 2 jobs, helping my parents pay off their debt. At 25, I drained my savings, every last dollar, to help Jordan start a small business. He swore it was his big break. 1 year later, it collapsed because he spent the money on parties, vacations, and gambling. Through it all, I told myself that one day my parents would see me, that they would be proud of me like they were proud of him, but they never did. I wasn't their golden child. I was their lifeline. And today, when I finally did something for myself, they didn't care. People started arriving at my cafe, friends clapping me on the back, customers smiling as they walked in. I plastered on a smile, stuffing the betrayal deep inside, refusing to let them ruin this day. But inside, something snapped. I had spent too many years breaking myself apart to hold them together. Not anymore. I stepped behind the counter, taking in the warm lights of the cafe, the sign above the door reading Celeste's Coffee House. This was mine, and I was done being their safety net. With steady hands, I unlocked my phone, opened my banking app, and canceled every automatic payment I had set up for them. No more rent, no more bills, no more bailing Jordan out of his reckless mistakes. They had chosen Jordan. Let him take care of them now. 3 days later, my phone rang. I recognized the name immediately. Ronald Morgan. I didn't need to answer to know why he was calling. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling to explain. He was calling because he noticed the missing money. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the decline button. I could ignore him. I could block the number and move on with my life. But I didn't. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I swiped to accept the call, raising the phone to my ear. "Celeste, what the hell do you think you're doing?" And just like that, the real fight began. After everything I've done for them, my father's first words to me weren't, "I'm sorry." They were, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I tightened my grip on the phone, my free hand curling into a fist. The anger in my father's voice was thick and sharp, like I had just insulted him instead of simply stopping my financial support. "Good to hear from you too, Dad," I said, my voice flat. How was Jordan's party? A beat of silence, then a scoff. Don't get smart with me, Celeste, he snapped. Your mother's in tears because you canceled the autopay on the mortgage. Are you trying to put us on the street? I nearly laughed. The mortgage. Not the fact that they abandoned me on one of the most important days of my life. Not the empty promises. Not even an ounce of guilt. Just money. I'm not paying for your house anymore, I said, my voice steady despite the way my pulse pounded in my ears. Or your bills. Or anything. A sharp inhale. Then an ugly, bitter laugh. You don't get to do that, he said, his tone shifting into something dangerous and low. We're your family, Celeste. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. You owe us. Something inside me snapped. I shot up from my seat, pacing the small apartment, my footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. Owe you? I repeated, my voice rising. Dad, I skipped college so you wouldn't lose the house. I worked double shifts while Jordan wasted money on parties and stupid business ideas. I paid for your medical bills, for Mom's emergencies, for everything, while you never even asked how I was doing. And the one day I needed you, you threw a party for him instead. Silence. For a moment I thought he'd hung up, but then he exhaled, long and heavy. That's not fair, he muttered. Jordan needed us. He's not as strong as you, Celeste. You've always been the responsible one. We figured you'd understand. The words hit me like a slap. You're strong, so you don't need us. You're responsible, so you don't get support. You're not him, so you don't matter. I pressed my fingers to my temple, trying to force down the lump rising in my throat. You picked him, I said quietly, shaking my head. Again and again. And now you expect me to clean up the mess? We didn't pick anything, my father growled. It was bad timing. You're blowing this out of proportion. I stopped dead in my tracks. Bad timing. Bad timing. The sheer audacity of it made my breath hitch. You knew about my grand opening for months, I said, my voice cold. You never even called to say you weren't coming, and now you want me to feel bad because Mom is crying over a mortgage? You made your choice. Now live with it. Another pause. Then his voice, sharp and filled with venom. You listen to me, young lady. You have one chance to fix this. Put the money back, apologize to your mother, and we'll forget this nonsense. If you don't... He paused, and I could already hear the threat forming on his lips. You're out. No family, no inheritance. Nothing. We'll write you off like you never existed. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. I could picture him standing in the kitchen, his brows furrowed, that same stubborn look he always had when he thought he was in control. But this time, he wasn't. The air left my lungs, and suddenly, it didn't hurt as much as I expected. I let the silence stretch, savoring it. Then I exhaled and spoke the words I should have said years ago. Then do it. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. He hadn't expected that. Disown me, I said, my voice calmer than it had any right to be. Because I don't need your house. I don't need your money. And I sure as hell don't need a family who only values me for what I can give them. You don't mean that. But I did. I meant it with every fiber of my being. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up before he could say another word, my thumb hovering over the block button. The phone buzzed again. Then again. 5 missed calls. But I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off my phone and sank onto the couch, my body trembling. Bryce, my fiancé, walked in from the kitchen, brows furrowed as he took in my expression. What happened? He asked, concern lacing his voice. I exhaled slowly, looking at him, the only person who had ever truly been on my side. They disowned me, I said, the words tasting strange on my tongue. Bryce's eyes darkened, but he didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around me, solid and warm, and pulled me close. "They didn't deserve you anyway," he murmured against my hair. "But I do. And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in years, I let myself believe that. The next morning, I found an unmarked envelope slipped under my door. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. My father's. I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. The weight of it felt heavier than paper. Heavier than just words. I opened it, my hand steady as I unfolded the single sheet inside. Typed neatly in bold black ink was the following sentence. "As of this day, Celeste Morgan is no longer our daughter. She has chosen selfishness over family. All ties are severed. Ronald and Marianne Morgan." I read it twice, 3 times. Then, without a second thought, I walked into the kitchen, turned on the gas stove, and lit the letter on fire. I watched as the flames ate away at the paper, curling the edges into blackened ash. The words disappeared. The guilt burned with it. And in its place, something new settled inside me. Not regret, not pain, freedom. They cut me off, erased me like I was nothing. But the thing about burning bridges? It goes both ways. It had been 2 years since my parents officially disowned me. 2 years since I stopped being their personal bank. 2 years since I took the ashes of their letter, washed my hands of them, and built something real, something that was mine. My cafe, Celeste's coffee house, wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The seats were always full, the pastries sold out every morning, and people came back not just for the coffee, but for the warmth, the community. Meanwhile, my parents and Jordan, their world had crumbled. I didn't check in on them. I didn't need to. The whispers found me. Jordan's second business venture had failed just like the first, but this time there was no safety net, no big sister to bail him out. He had burned through his own savings and our parents', leaving them drowning in debt. Rumors spread that my mother had started selling off jewelry. And my father? He'd been seen arguing with a bank teller more than once. I should have felt something. Pity, anger, satisfaction. But instead, all I felt was nothing. I had given them everything, and when I had nothing left to give, they had thrown me away. Now they were falling apart, and I wasn't going to catch them. I was restocking the pastry case one afternoon when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I ignored it. 2 minutes later, it buzzed again. Then again. Something inside me tightened. I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron and picked up, half expecting a scam call. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Celeste?" My mother. My stomach clenched. For a second, I almost hung up. But curiosity, or maybe some old habit, kept me there. I didn't say anything. She sniffled, and I could already picture it. The trembling lip, the well-rehearsed victim act she had perfected over the years. "Sweetheart, it's your mother. I know it's been a while, but we need to talk." I stayed silent. "Please," she continued, her voice cracking. We're in trouble. The house. We're about to lose it. Jordan. He's gone, Celeste. He ran off. Took everything." That caught my attention. Jordan was gone? My grip on the phone tightened. She wasn't lying. I could hear the raw panic in her voice. "Celeste," she whispered, desperation seeping into every syllable. "We have nothing. We have no one. Please, I cut her off. "Where was this energy when I needed you?" Silence. I exhaled slowly, gripping the counter to steady myself. "You didn't care when I was drowning," I said, my voice level. "You didn't care when I needed support, when I was struggling to build my life while paying for yours. You left me behind. We made mistakes," she stammered. We thought you'd always be there." Of course they did. They thought I would always be the responsible one, the one who would sacrifice, the one who would come running when they snapped their fingers. But that girl was gone. I can't help you, I said simply. A sharp inhale, a choked sob. Celeste, we're your family. I laughed, cold and sharp. No, I corrected. I was only family when I was useful, but I'm not your safety net anymore. I could almost hear her unraveling on the other end, scrambling for something, anything, to make me cave. Then she played her last card. Celeste, she whispered. It's the house. The house you grew up in. You can buy it. You can save it. We'll even move out. Just don't let them take it. I froze. They didn't just want money. They wanted me to buy their house. The house where I had spent years being overlooked. The house where Jordan got everything handed to him while I worked myself to the bone. And now they were offering it to me? Like a prize? Something twisted inside me. They had chosen Jordan over me. And now that he had abandoned them, they wanted me back. I should have said no. I should have hung up. But instead, a thought crept in. Dark and tempting. What if I said yes? Not to help them. To finish what they started. I smoothed my apron, my heartbeat steady. I'll think about it, I said, then hung up before she could respond. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, feeling something dangerous take root inside me. They wanted me to save them. I was going to do something much worse. Comment the number 1 if you want to see how Celeste makes them pay. They begged me to buy the house to save them. So I did. But not in the way they expected. I spent a week thinking it over. Not about helping them. No, that part was already decided. They had burned that bridge long ago. I was thinking about how to make them pay. They had spent years taking from me. My money, my time, my love, without a second thought. And now, when their precious golden child had abandoned them, they expected me to clean up his mess. I was going to show them what it felt like to be powerless. The first step was buying the house. Not out of pity. Not to keep it in the family. I bought it to take it away. Through a silent auction, I made an anonymous offer. With their debts piling up and foreclosure looming over them, they had no choice but to accept. The day the sale went through, my mother called again. Celeste, sweetheart, you did it. You saved us, she gushed, her voice thick with fake relief. I let her ramble for a few minutes, basking in the way she thought she had won. Then I spoke. Mom, I said, my voice cool. You misunderstood something. Silence. I could hear the moment her excitement curdled into confusion. What do you mean? She asked, her voice careful now. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile curling on my lips. I didn't buy the house to save you, I said. I bought it because I own it now. And you have 30 days to move out. The line went dead silent. Then, a choked gasp. You're joking, she whispered. I wasn't. You had no problem kicking me out of your life when I stopped being useful, I reminded her. So now, I'm returning the favor. The sob that came through the phone was raw, panicked. But where will we go? She pleaded. We have nowhere. I didn't answer. I just let her feel it. The same helplessness I had felt when they abandoned me. A week later, I drove to the house. My house. The one they no longer owned. I parked outside, watching as movers carried out their furniture piece by piece. My mother stood on the porch, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red from crying. My father stood beside her, jaw clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might crack. I stepped out of the car, walking toward them with purpose. My mother turned to me, her hands shaking. Celeste, please, she begged. We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We thought we had time to fix things. I tilted my head. You had years to fix things, I said, my voice calm. But you only cared when it was too late. when you needed something from me. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Celeste, just give us some time. My father cut in, his voice low and bitter. We'll figure something out. I folded my arms. You have 1 week, I said. After that, I don't want to see either of you here again. His face turned red. You're heartless, he spat. After everything we did for you, I laughed. Everything you did for me? I repeated. You mean the years of taking my money without a second thought? The way you treated me like a backup plan? The way you erased me when I refused to keep paying for your lives? His fists clenched at his sides. You're going to regret this, Celeste, he hissed. When we're gone, you'll wish you helped us. I met his glare without flinching. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll finally be free. I turned on my heel and walked back to my car, never looking back. 1 week later, they were gone. The house was mine, and I wasn't keeping it. No, that place held nothing but bad memories. I wanted it gone. So I sold it. Not to another family, not to someone who would try to preserve it. I sold it to a developer who tore it to the ground. Where that house once stood, a new cafe opened 6 months later. A second location for my business, right where their home used to be. A place that was mine. A place where their memory no longer existed. A few months after the demolition, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. I opened it carefully, my breath catching as I saw the signature at the bottom. Jordan. I scanned the letter quickly, my heart pounding. It was short. Too short. Celeste, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but you were right about everything. Mom and Dad used us. They used you worse. And when I had nothing left to give them, they threw me away too. I messed up. I know that. But I just wanted to say, I get it now, and I'm sorry. I stared at the letter for a long time, my emotions a storm I couldn't quite name. Jordan, the golden child, the one who always got everything handed to him. And now? Now, he was just like me, alone, forgotten. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel rage toward him. I just felt nothing at all. They took everything from me, so I took everything from them, and now, they have nothing left. Months had passed since I watched their house, my house, get torn to the ground, since I signed the papers and walked away without a second thought, since I reclaimed my life and left them behind in the ruins they created. My cafe had expanded, 2 locations now, both thriving. My team had grown, filled with people who supported me, who saw me for more than just what I could give them. And my parents? They had disappeared into nothingness. I never reached out, never checked in. As far as I was concerned, they no longer existed. But then, one rainy evening, as I was closing up my cafe, they showed up. I was wiping down the counters when I noticed 2 figures standing outside, hunched under the dim glow of the streetlights. For a moment, I didn't recognize them, but then my stomach turned. It was them. My mother looked smaller, her once carefully styled hair now limp and streaked with gray. Her coat, one she had once bragged about buying for thousands, was threadbare. My father stood beside her, looking like a shell of the man who once barked orders at me over the phone. His posture slumped, his hands shoved deep into his worn-out jacket. They weren't the same people who had stood in front of their house, smug and entitled, demanding my money. They looked broken. For the first time in my life, I had all the power. I took my time unlocking the door, stepping outside with deliberate slowness, arms crossed. Neither of them spoke at first. Then my mother, always the manipulator, tried first. Celeste, she whispered, her voice shaking. We didn't know where else to go. I tilted my head. That's funny, I said, my voice cold. Because 2 years ago you had plenty of places to go. You had Jordan. You had that big house. You had your precious lifestyle. Her face crumpled. We made mistakes, she murmured. We should have been better parents. You should have chosen me. I cut in, my tone sharp. But you didn't. And now you're here, begging from the daughter you threw away. My father clenched his jaw, his pride warring with his desperation. Just a little help, he muttered. We don't need much. Just a place to stay. A few months. We'll find work. I laughed. A real, bitter, satisfied laugh. They still didn't get it. They thought this was temporary, that I would fix things, like I always had. But I wasn't their backup plan anymore. I took a slow step forward, meeting their hollow, desperate eyes. You once told me, I murmured, that if I didn't obey, if I didn't pay up, I would be cut off. Disowned. Erased. Neither of them spoke. I smiled. Well, congratulations, I said softly. You got exactly what you wanted. My mother let out a sob, stepping forward as if to grab my hands. But I stepped back, and then I said the words I had been waiting to say for years. You're not my family. You're just two strangers begging on the street. Her breath hitched. My father's hands tightened into fists, but they both knew. It was over. I turned, walking back inside without another word. Before I shut the door, I looked back one last time. They were still standing there, rain dripping down their faces, looking lost. I let the door click shut, locking them out of my life forever. And for the first time in my life, I felt light. That night, I sat in my warm, bright cafe, drinking a cup of coffee as I watched the rain pour outside. My family wasn't out there. My family was in here. My employees. My friends. Bryce, who wrapped an arm around me and kissed my temple, murmuring, "You did the right thing." I smiled against my cup. I wasn't the strong one anymore. I wasn't the sacrificial daughter who had to fix everything. I was free. And they were nothing. Comment the number 1 if you think Celeste made the right choice. And don't forget to subscribe, there's always more stories to come.